One of the biggest misconceptions about nuts is that they're low carb and therefore safe to eat in large quantities, especially for people following a ketogenic, low carb, or intermittent fasting lifestyle. While many nuts are low in sugar, they're not always as metabolically neutral as they appear. The truth is, some nuts contain enough net carbs to raise insulin levels when consumed in excess, and that spike in insulin can silently sabotage your muscle, preserving efforts over time. Let's take cashews as an example. Cashews are one of the most popular snack nuts, and they're often seen as a healthier alternative to chips or cookies. But what most people don't realize is that cashews have about 9 grams of net carbs per ounce. Eat just a small handful, say 2 ounces, and you're already pushing 18 grams of carbs. That's nearly the carb content of a small banana. If you're trying to maintain a ketogenic state or even just prevent excessive insulin secretion, this level of carbohydrate intake from a snack food can be enough to break your fasted state, spike insulin, and shut down fat burning and muscle repair. When insulin rises, two major things happen that directly affect muscle mass. First, growth hormone drops. Growth hormone is one of the most important anabolic hormones in the body. It helps preserve lean muscle during fasting, supports fat burning, and aids in recovery and regeneration. When insulin goes up, growth hormone goes down almost immediately. Second, elevated insulin blocks lipolysis, the breakdown of fat for fuel. When your body can't access fat for energy, it starts looking for other sources. And unfortunately, that often includes muscle tissue, especially if you're in a calorie deficit or under physical stress. Even nuts that are lower on the carb scale, like pistachios or chestnuts, still carry enough carbohydrate content to affect your insulin sensitivity if eaten mindlessly or in bulk. This is especially dangerous for people who graze or snack frequently throughout the day. Every time you eat, especially something that contains carbs, you cause a metabolic shift. Your body releases insulin, exits fat burning mode, and pauses many of the regenerative processes that happen during fasting, such as autophagy, hormone optimization, and muscle preservation through GH and testosterone. Another factor to consider is leptin and ghrelin, your hunger and satiety hormones. Nuts that trigger insulin spikes can dysregulate these hormones, causing you to feel hungry even after eating. That's why it's so easy to overeat cashews, pistachios, or even almonds. You start with a handful, and before you know it, you've consumed 500 to 700 calories, mostly from fat and carbs, without realizing how significantly you've disrupted your fasting window or muscle repair phase. Over time, this leads to chronic low-level insulin elevation, which blunts anabolic hormone production and encourages catabolic breakdown, the exact opposite of what you want if you're trying to build or maintain lean mass. And let's not forget the context of timing. If you're consuming these carb-heavy nuts late at night or right before bed, you're raising insulin during the hours when your body should be releasing the highest levels of growth hormone. This blunted hormonal release has downstream effects on recovery, sleep quality, and muscle tissue repair. Nighttime insulin spikes are one of the most damaging factors for hormonal health, and the cumulative impact is a body that becomes progressively less efficient at building or holding onto lean mass. So while nuts can have a place in a nutrient-dense, low-carb diet, certain types, especially those higher in net carbs, can quietly disrupt your hormonal balance, spike insulin, and initiate a slow but consistent loss of muscle mass, particularly if you're relying on them as a frequent snack. Ask ChatGPT. You said 6. ChatGPT said here's the full expansion of Keynote 6, continuing with the informative and metabolically focused tone similar to Dr. Eric Berg's delivery. Most people don't realize that certain nuts are extremely high in phytic acid, a naturally occurring compound also known as an anti-nutrient. Phytic acid is found in seeds, legumes, grains, and especially in nuts, particularly almonds, walnuts, and cashews. While this compound might sound harmless, it has a major downside. It binds to key minerals in your digestive tract, especially zinc, magnesium, calcium, and iron, and prevents your body from absorbing them. This becomes a serious issue if you're focused on preserving or building muscle, because all of these minerals are essential for muscle contraction, protein synthesis, mitochondrial function, and hormonal balance. Let's talk about zinc first. Zinc is critical for testosterone production and immune function. It's also necessary for muscle protein synthesis and tissue repair. If you're eating large amounts of phytic acid-rich nuts on a daily basis, especially without soaking or sprouting them, you're unknowingly blocking zinc absorption. That means even if you're taking a zinc supplement or eating zinc-rich foods like red meat, oysters, or pumpkin seeds, you may not actually be absorbing that zinc. Over time, this can lead to subclinical zinc deficiency, which doesn't always show up on blood tests, but can result in sluggish recovery, fatigue, low libido, and poor muscle response to resistance training. Now let's look at magnesium. This is another critical mineral for muscle function, ATP production, and relaxation. Without adequate magnesium, your muscles can't contract efficiently and your recovery slows down. Magnesium also plays a key role in managing stress. It helps regulate the parasympathetic nervous system, keeping cortisol in check. If your magnesium absorption is constantly compromised by a high phytate diet, you'll likely see increased muscle cramps, restlessness, difficulty sleeping, and overall increased catabolic activity. That means more breakdown, less building. Calcium is next. While many associate calcium only with bone health, it's absolutely vital for initiating muscle contraction. Every time your muscle fires, whether during a heavy lift or a sprint, calcium ions flood into the muscle cell to start the process. If calcium levels are even slightly deficient due to poor absorption, your muscular endurance suffers. You may feel weaker during workouts, get fatigued quicker, or struggle to maintain muscle tone even with consistent training. And again, it doesn't matter how much calcium you're consuming. If phytic acid is blocking its absorption, it never reaches your muscle cells. Iron is also worth mentioning here. It's necessary for the production of hemoglobin and myoglobin, which deliver oxygen to your muscles. Poor iron absorption leads to low energy, poor stamina, and suboptimal recovery, all of which contribute to a catabolic environment where your body is breaking down muscle faster than it can rebuild it. To make things worse, phytic acid isn't just blocking the absorption of these minerals for one meal, it can disrupt mineral uptake for hours after ingestion. That means if you eat a handful of almonds as a snack at noon, and then try to consume a mineral-rich meal later in the afternoon, your body is still under the influence of those anti-nutrients, and your nutrient absorption remains impaired. Over time, this leads to deficiency patterns that are hard to detect, low-grade, chronic, and deeply disruptive to both metabolism and muscle health. The solution isn't necessarily to eliminate all nuts, but to be strategic. Most people never soak, sprout, or ferment their nuts, processes that reduce phytic acid significantly. And when nuts are roasted instead of raw, they often retain or even increase phytic acid levels, especially when combined with seed oils or salt. So if you're eating nuts in their most common commercial forms, roasted, salted, processed, you're getting the worst of both worlds, the anti-nutrients plus inflammatory oils. The takeaway here is that your muscle tissue doesn't just depend on protein and calories. It depends on micronutrient delivery and absorption. If you're not getting these key minerals into your cells, not just your bloodstream, then your ability to maintain lean mass, recover from workouts, keep hormones balanced is seriously compromised. When people think of nuts, they picture a healthy, convenient snack, portable, nutrient-dense, and often marketed as heart-healthy. But the issue isn't just which nut you're eating, it's how that nut is processed and packaged. This is one of the biggest traps people fall into, especially those trying to eat clean while on the go. The problem arises when you're consuming nuts that are flavored, roasted, sweetened, or combined in trail mixes. These seemingly innocent additions can sabotage your metabolic health and accelerate muscle loss, especially if you're already trying to manage insulin levels, inflammation, or hormonal imbalances. Let's start with sugar. Many nut mixes on store shelves include sweet coatings, honey roasted, maple glazed, chocolate-covered yogurt, dipped. These sound appetizing, but they come with a price. Even a small handful can contain 8 to 15 grams of sugar. That's enough to cause a significant insulin spike. And when insulin goes up, several things happen. Your body immediately shuts down fat-burning, growth hormone production drops, and your body switches into storage mode, not repair mode. Now, if this happens occasionally, your body can recover, but if you're eating these types of nuts daily, or even a few times a week, your insulin levels never fully come down. Chronic elevation in insulin is one of the main drivers of muscle wasting, especially as you age, and it's very deceptive. You're not eating cake or candy, but you're still getting the same hormonal consequences. Then there are the flavor enhancers. Many commercial nut mixes include additives like monosodium glutamate MSG to improve taste and prolong shelf life. MSG is known to overstimulate your nervous system and can interfere with appetite regulation and leptin signaling. What does this mean for muscle? Overstimulation of glutamate receptors can cause excitotoxicity. Too much stimulation to your cells, which leads to energy crashes, adrenal stress, and indirectly muscle breakdown. It's subtle but significant. You'll feel hungrier, crave more carbs, have more difficulty fasting, and your cortisol will rise, all of which shift your body into a catabolic state. The third hidden threat is refined oils used in the roasting process. Many nuts are roasted in canola oil, soybean oil, or sunflower oil, all of which are high in omega-6 fatty acids and extremely inflammatory when heated. These oils oxidize quickly at high temperatures, forming harmful compounds called aldehydes and lipid peroxides. Once consumed, these compounds contribute to oxidative stress, damage your mitochondria, and interfere with cellular repair, including in muscle cells. Remember, your body is constantly balancing between building up tissue and breaking it down. When you introduce toxins that overwhelm the body's detoxification systems, especially the liver, your body downregulates anabolic processes, including muscle protein synthesis. Even salt can be a hidden issue, not because sodium itself is bad, but because most of these products use refined table salt instead of natural sea salt or Himalayan salt. Refined salt is stripped of minerals and can contribute to electrolyte imbalances when consumed in large amounts, especially in combination with processed oils and sugars. Electrolytes like potassium, magnesium, and sodium are crucial for muscle contraction, hydration, and recovery. If you're training hard and snacking on these processed nuts thinking you're refueling, you might actually be depleting your body of what it truly needs. So, what appears to be a harmless snack, a handful of mixed nuts from a convenience store or a flavored nut bar, can become a perfect storm of insulin spikes, inflammation, oxidative stress, and hormonal disruption. And the long-term consequence of that is muscle breakdown, slower recovery, and increased fat storage. The more frequently you consume these packaged, flavored, and roasted nuts, or the more your body moves away from an anabolic, muscle-preserving state and into a chronically inflamed catabolic one. You said 4. ChatGPT said, here's the expanded version of Keynote 4, continuing in the tone and educational style of Dr. Berg. Another often overlooked danger when it comes to nuts, especially for those trying to preserve or build muscle, is the presence of mold and mycotoxins, particularly in certain types of nuts that are more prone to contamination. One of the biggest culprits here is peanuts. And it's important to understand that peanuts aren't even true nuts. They're legumes, which already makes them structurally different in terms of how they affect your digestion and immune response here. But the bigger concern is how peanuts are grown, harvested, and stored. Peanuts are typically grown underground in warm, humid climates. This makes them highly susceptible to mold growth here, especially when they're not harvested or stored correctly. And the most concerning byproduct of this mold contamination is something called aflatoxin. Aflatoxins are potent mycotoxins, toxic compounds produced by certain strains of fungi, primarily Aspergillus flavus. These toxins are not only carcinogenic, but they are also hepatotoxic, meaning they directly damage the liver. Why does this matter for your muscles? Because your liver is a hormonal powerhouse. It's responsible for metabolizing hormones, regulating insulin sensitivity, detoxifying estrogen, and converting thyroid hormones into their active form. When your liver is burdened by toxins like aflatoxins, it becomes sluggish. This leads to a backlog of unmetabolized hormones, estrogen dominance, low testosterone, reduced IGF-1, and impaired protein synthesis, all of which severely impact your ability to build and preserve muscle mass. And it doesn't stop there. A damaged liver affects your ability to convert ammonia into urea, a key part of protein metabolism. If ammonia starts building up in your system due to poor detoxification, it creates an internal environment that's not just inefficient, it's toxic to muscle tissue. That's why people with liver damage or dysfunction often experience muscle wasting, especially around the arms and legs. Now imagine slowly poisoning your liver over time with small but regular doses of aflatoxins from contaminated nuts like peanuts. You're setting yourself up for gradual, low-level liver stress that slowly chips away at your hormonal and muscular health without you even realizing it. Even nuts like pistachios and Brazil nuts can carry these molds if stored improperly. The issue isn't limited to cheap peanuts in vending machines. Unless the nuts you're consuming are organically grown, mold-tested, and stored in cool, dry environments, you could be ingesting compounds that create oxidative stress, compromise your immune system, and throw off your endocrine balance. Another layer of concern is the immune response triggered by mold exposure. Mycotoxins are not just toxic to the liver, they're immunosuppressive and can lead to low-grade inflammation throughout the body. Chronic inflammation, as we've discussed, raises cortisol and interferes with the muscle repair process. It can also increase gut permeability, leading to issues with nutrient absorption, especially amino acids and B vitamins, both critical for muscle metabolism and energy production. If you're consuming nut butters, trail mixes, or bulk nuts that haven't been tested for mold content, you're potentially loading your system with hidden toxins every single day. And because the effects of these toxins are slow and cumulative, you may not connect the dots until symptoms begin to show. Muscle fatigue, slower recovery, hormonal shifts, and eventually noticeable muscle atrophy. This is one of the silent ways your body breaks down muscle over time, not from lack of exercise or protein, but from internal stress and toxicity that interferes with anabolic processes. So while nuts might seem harmless and even beneficial in small amounts, those contaminated with mold or mycotoxins can be metabolic saboteurs, especially when muscle preservation and hormone health are your goals. When it comes to building and preserving muscle, most people focus on protein intake, workout routines, and supplements. But what often gets overlooked is how certain foods, even so-called healthy foods like nuts, can actually work against your muscle goals. There are specific types of nuts that contain compounds and profiles that, when consumed regularly, can contribute to nutrient deficiencies, hormonal imbalance, chronic inflammation, and even muscle wasting over time. Let's break down exactly how this happens and why you need to avoid certain nuts if you want to maintain lean muscle mass. The first issue is anti-nutrients, naturally occurring compounds in plants that interfere with the absorption of key minerals. Some nuts, like almonds and cashews, are high in phytic acid. Phytic acid binds to essential minerals such as magnesium, zinc, calcium, and iron in your digestive tract, making them unavailable to your body. These minerals are critical for muscle growth and maintenance. Zinc, for example, is required for testosterone production, which plays a direct role in muscle protein synthesis. Magnesium is involved in hundreds of biochemical reactions, including ATP production, the cellular energy needed during workouts. If you're consuming nuts that rob your body of these minerals, or your muscle development will suffer silently over time. You may think you're eating clean, but in reality, your body may be starving of what it needs to repair and grow muscle tissue. Next is the omega-6 to omega ratio. Your body needs both omega-6 and omega-3 fatty acids, but the ratio matters. Nuts like peanuts, pine nuts, and even walnuts contain very high levels of omega-6 fats, which are pro-inflammatory when consumed in excess. Chronic inflammation increases cortisol, your stress hormone, and cortisol is highly catabolic, meaning it breaks down muscle tissue. If your diet is skewed heavily toward omega-6 fats and you're not balancing that with omega-3 rich foods like wild-caught fish or flaxseed, you're creating a hormonal environment that favors muscle breakdown rather than muscle growth. This is especially dangerous if you're already overtraining or under high stress, as inflammation adds another layer of metabolic stress that the body has to fight. Another danger zone is commercial nut mixes. Most people think they're making a smart snack choice by grabbing a pack of flavored almonds or honey roasted peanuts. But these products are often loaded with hidden sugars, artificial flavors, or monosodium glutamate MSG, and refined seed oils like canola or soybean oil. All of these spike insulin and disrupt metabolic flexibility. High insulin suppresses fat burning, but more importantly, it reduces growth hormone and testosterone levels, both of which are anabolic hormones that preserve and build muscle. And remember, every time insulin spikes, your body shifts into storage mode. That storage mode is not muscle building, it's fat storing. Over time, regular consumption of these snack nuts contributes to insulin resistance, fatigue, and muscle loss, even if you're hitting the gym. Storage and contamination are also major concerns with certain nuts. Peanuts, which aren't even true nuts but legumes, are especially prone to mold growth. When peanuts are stored in warm, humid conditions, they can develop aflatoxins, toxic compounds produced by certain molds. Aflatoxins are not just mildly irritating, they're liver damaging and potentially carcinogenic. When your liver is under stress, your hormones suffer. That includes your thyroid hormones, testosterone, and IGF-1, all of which are crucial to keeping your metabolism and muscle mass intact. Poor liver function also interferes with your ability to detoxify estrogen, which, when elevated, further diminishes your muscle building potential. And finally, while nuts are generally low in carbs, some of them still contain enough net carbs to disrupt your insulin sensitivity when eaten in excess. Cashews and pistachios are particularly notable here. 1 cup of cashews can have over 30 grams of carbs. If you're trying to maintain a state of ketosis or even just stable blood sugar for muscle preservation, consuming these high-carb nuts can spike insulin, kick you out of fat-burning mode, and promote muscle breakdown by inhibiting the action of key anabolic hormones. The effect is subtle but cumulative. You may not notice it after one snack, but over time, your body is constantly bouncing between fed and fasted states, never fully tapping into the repair and recovery processes that preserve lean tissue. Ask ChatGPT, you said too, ChatGPT said, Here's the continuation, expanding further on the second keynote from before, keeping the tone and structure aligned with Dr. Berg's style. We already touched on the issue of omega-6 fatty acids, but let's go deeper. The imbalance of omega-6 to omega-3 in the modern diet is a significant factor in chronic inflammation, and unfortunately, certain nuts are heavy contributors. The problem isn't that omega-6 are bad, your body actually needs them in small amounts. But the issue lies in the proportions. Ideally, your omega-6 to omega-3 ratio should be about 1:1 or 2:1. In reality, for most people, it's closer to 21 or even 30:1, and nuts are a major reason for that. Nuts like peanuts, walnuts, pine nuts, and Brazil nuts contain extremely high levels of linoleic acid, a type of omega-6 fat. Linoleic acid is especially problematic because once it gets incorporated into your cell membranes, it becomes highly susceptible to oxidation. Oxidized fats generate free radicals, and that drives systemic inflammation. Now, here's where it really affects your muscles. The chronic inflammation increases cytokine activity, which interferes with the mTOR pathway, the very pathway responsible for stimulating muscle protein synthesis. So instead of building muscle, your body is stuck in a low-grade inflammatory state, breaking down tissue instead of rebuilding it. And this isn't just theoretical. Our studies have shown that a high intake of omega-6 fatty acids can suppress testosterone levels in men, increase cortisol, and blunt growth hormone production. Testosterone, GH, and IGF-1 are critical if your goal is to preserve or gain lean mass. The inflammation also affects insulin signaling. When cells become inflamed, insulin becomes less effective. As insulin resistance sets in, it becomes harder for amino acids to enter muscle cells, which is required for proper recovery and growth. So you're not just losing the benefits of your workouts, you're setting yourself up for a gradual decline in strength and lean body mass. Now you might be thinking, But aren't walnuts good for your brain? Yes, they do contain based omega-3s a lot, but the amount of omega-6 they contain far outweighs the benefit unless you're actively balancing it out with EPA and DHA from marine sources. This is why context matters. If you're on a ketogenic or anti-inflammatory diet and you're already consuming fatty fish, grass-fed meats, or fish oil, a few walnuts here and there might not be a problem. But for the average person eating a typical high-carb, high-seed oil diet, adding high linoleic acid nuts is like pouring gasoline on a metabolic fire. Another overlooked issue is how nuts are prepared. Roasting nuts in vegetable oils like soybean or sunflower oil, both high in omega-6, makes the problem even worse. These oils oxidize at high temperatures, and the result is rancid, or damaged fats that increase lipid peroxidation inside your body. This not only damages cell membranes, but also mitochondrial function. And if your mitochondria are damaged, your body's ability to generate energy, especially during exercise, will plummet. When ATP output drops, your recovery slows, and your ability to maintain or grow muscle tissue is compromised. If you're eating a lot of these high omega-6 nuts under the impression that they're a healthy snack, you could unknowingly be creating a metabolic environment that promotes catabolism, the breakdown of muscle, instead of anabolism. Over time, this can contribute to muscle atrophy, joint pain, slower recovery, and overall hormonal decline.